I've been approaching this as a kind of an autobiographical presentation. This is like the, confessional time, I guess. Much more than anything prescriptive. I just want to sort of share the journey I've been on for a few years and how it has led me to where I am right now and why on earth I would come to a TechLearn conference and talk about why my class has less technology in it than ever before. So that's kind of where we're going. I landed at Pepperdine, arrived at Pepperdine in 2003, began teaching in the fall of 2003. And at that time, the issue of students bringing computing devices to classes was a big issue. Very few students were bringing laptops at that time. Anybody remember when the first iPhone dropped? What year? 2007, right? So I was beginning my career at Seaver 4 years before the iPhone was even on the horizon. I had just purchased my first cell phone, a little flip phone with an LED screen, right? And that was because my wife was pregnant. And our second child was born in October after I started teaching in September. So things have changed a lot, obviously, since then. But let's talk about some of the journey that I was on before we got to where we are really today. Jerry, in the introduction earlier today, characterized me as an early adopter, and I think that's fair. I get excited about new technology. If any of you are listening, well, Jonathan's not here, right? I have not yet upgraded any of my Pepperdine-owned devices to High Sierra, so I play by the rules. But I'm the kind of person who would just go ahead and blaze that trail and then go to my tech liaison who's in the back here and say, hey, I can't print. And he would say, well, it's because you've got unauthorized software on your device. But in terms of trying to incorporate technology into things that happen in the classroom, I have always tried, that's hyperbole, but I have thought of myself as an early adopter. As soon as projection technology became available to me, I was there, ready with my slides, ready with my PowerPoint until Keynote came out, and then Keynote to project on the screens and to try to enhance my teaching in that way. When clickers were a thing, anybody remember those? Clickers? When clickers were a thing, I tried to adopt clickers. Some other professors had adopted them first before I learned about them or was able to use them. So we had an iPad study. Remember the iPad classroom set study that kind of didn't go very far, I guess, after a few semesters. But I was a participant in that for my medium-sized lecture class, which I'm going to say for me at Seaver, medium-sized, I mean about 50-ish, 50 to 55 students. And then a little tiny class of Hebrew students, students learning the biblical Hebrew language. So that has been sort of my experience. As we got into, closer and closer to 2010 and beyond, the phenomenon of students having mobile devices, phones, and laptop computers, especially laptops, there came a point, I used to ask every year, people like Alan, how many of our students own laptops? Do we know this? Do we have these metrics? There came a point at which, and I don't remember if Alan was specifically the person I was asking, but when the information that was coming back was 95% of Seaver students are showing up with laptops. At that point, I tried to leverage that and tried to bring those laptops into the classroom and began actually requiring students to buy certain apps which they could run. And I was pretty careful to try to choose apps that were available on, in fact, I delayed this until the particular functions that I wanted to do were available on Windows and Mac and Android and iOS. And once that happened, which was 2011, I think, then I started actually requiring students to bring laptops or a mobile computing device to class to use. And in my particular case, I teach religion, and so it was a Bible app, searchable Bible app, and part of what I was trying to do was teach them search skills, right? So frustrated with me because of all the parentheses and asterisks and question marks that they had to use to find stuff in their English Bibles. Well, that was probably the one of the high points, I guess you might say, of device use in my classrooms. And I was pretty laissez-faire at that point. There were certain times when I would say, you must have this app and I want you to do this activity with it. But most of the time, that was an out-of-class activity rather than an in-class activity. But I was very welcoming to student device use. So let me ask you all to talk to each other just for a minute and try to brainstorm just for a minute in a fairly laissez-faire kind of environment, kind of like what we've got actually right at this moment. What would be, can you kind of rank the top three valuable things, kind of the three most helpful things you think students could do with their mobile devices in class, and maybe the top three unhelpful things students maybe could do with their mobile devices? Take a couple of minutes, talk to each other real quick. Let's see if we can generate some ideas. Okay, if you can hear me, clap once. If you can hear me, clap twice. Awesome. Y'all are fantastic. Hey, somebody shout out some positive things, some helpful things students can do with their devices in class. Research. On-the-spot research, okay? Let me write some of these down. Positives, on-the-spot research, Insta research. Collaboration. Spell check. Collaboration, okay?
Communication and presentation.
Okay.
Answer polls.
What? Oh, okay, polls. Scheduling. Back channel communication.
Record lecture.
Scheduling, recording. Okay. I'm going to fact check. I'm going to wrap that into research. Okay, how about negative things? Top. Shop, text, Facebook, social media, watch sports videos or cat videos or whatever. Anything else? Other ideas? Oh, games. Ringtones. Oh, sure. Yeah. All right. In fact, all of those can kind of go into the category of distraction, right? Okay. So all of these things I observed. Well, no, not all of these things. Most of these things I actually observed in my classes for the several years where I really invited very openly students to use their devices and really kind of expected students to self-regulate a bit. Now, some of these sound better than they are, and all of these sound as bad as they are. One of the things that has happened in the last 10 years or so is that there have actually been empirical studies and controlled experiments about student use of technologies and so forth in the classroom. And there's two big findings that have drawn me toward less use of technology in the classroom. One of those big findings is the idea of multitasking as an impossibility for the human brain. Right? Multitasking is not something the human brain can really do. It's not possible. To put it, we're tech junkies here, so to put it in technical terms, computery terms, the human brain is a serial processor, not a parallel processor. Now, if you're skeptical about that, or you would like a way to demonstrate to your skeptical students that this is true, take out a sheet of paper. And if you need a sheet of paper, Yona has a nice fat pad of paper right here. You need a sheet of paper and a pen to do this.
You don't need a sheet of paper.
If you'd like a sheet of paper, raise your hand and Yona will give you a sheet of paper. Yeah. Now, computer chips. One of the great things about computer chips, about CPUs, is that they are in fact capable of parallel processing. They can do multiple tasks at the same time. Right? But the human brain, what the human brain is actually doing when we tell ourselves we are multitasking, such as I tell myself all the time that I am playing a video game and watching TV at the same time. It is not in fact true. What is happening is that my eyes and my attention are wiggling between the two activities, or switching. Right? So a better word than multitasking for what we are doing when we tell ourselves we're multitasking is switch tasking. Switch tasking. The problem is that switch tasking is a thief. I before you, except after C. Switch tasking is a thief. Because when you're dealing with something like walking and talking, walking and breathing and so forth, these are, when autonomic processes are not going to put a lot of cognitive load on your brain. Things that you've done 1,000 million times, like walking down this little aisle right here, are not going to put a big cognitive load on your brain. However, if I catch my foot on these wheels right here, and pardon me for making you an example, if I step backwards as I did the other day in my Hebrew class and catch my foot on a chair, now all of a sudden I got cognitive load on just walking, right? Much less two things that are demanding intellectually, such as listening to what the professor is saying and telling my friend, making arrangements with my friend about where we're going to meet for lunch. And so when you're trying to do multiple activities that have this cognitive load and you're switching between them, there's lag before your brain can actually catch up with the new activity. Research funded by AAA has actually shown that there's this delay can actually cost you up to 20 seconds of active attention. This is why we have laws against texting and driving in the state of California, because legislators are realizing this. Switch tasking is a thief. All right, you want the demonstration? Here's the demonstration. Everybody's got a piece of paper, right? So draw a line. Just draw a horizontal line across the paper. This probably works better if you're doing it. Well, it doesn't really matter which way you're doing it. Just draw a horizontal line across the paper. On the top, I'm gonna get out a digital device here with a timer on it, and on the when I say go, above the line, write this phrase: switch tasking is a thief. Not yet. When I say go, write switch tasking is a thief. Below the line, write in sequence the numbers from 1 to 21. Ready? Go. That was 5 seconds. 10 seconds. 15 seconds. Wave if you're through. 20 seconds. 25 seconds. Okay, so most of you can complete that task within 25 seconds. How do you feel? Great. All right. Now, either on the lower part, lower half of your page, or flip the page over, something like that. Draw another horizontal line. Above the line, you're going to write, switch tasking is a thief. Below the line, you're going to write the numbers from 1 to 21. However, here's how we're going to do it differently. You must do letters and then numbers alternating. So you write S1, W2, etc. Go. Five seconds. 10. 15, wave if you're done. 20. 25 seconds, wave if you're done. Okay, so when we did it the first time, almost everybody finished within 25 seconds. How many of you are not even halfway through yet? And it's 25 seconds. All right, so this is just a little demonstration of the difficulty, the cognitive load that we place on ourselves when we try to multitask things, try to do two different things that affect our attention. By the way, it's not just electronics that we can do this with, right? Actually, and this is crazy talk, the very act of taking notes distracts you from what the professor is saying. That is weird, but true. It's counterintuitive to us, but it's actually true because I'm thinking about what I'm writing instead of thinking what I'm hearing. Now, we had a great list up here of potentially positive things that could be going on. All right? And I've seen many of these going on. Now, some of these are positive, but they're not necessarily on task, right, of what you're trying to do in the moment. And did we get started a little late? Because isn't it time for me to be ending? Is that the wrong time? Oh, it's... okay. All right. So, but let me just pull out this one right here, research. I've seen students doing this in my classes. I'll be talking about some artifact from ancient Assyria, let's say, and a student will pull up the Wikipedia page about that particular artifact. All right? That sounds great. And initially I was very excited about that. But then I realized they were looking at the Wikipedia page about this artifact, right? Without any time to do even the most basic additional fact-checking, right? So if your students are fact-checking you in real time, they're not taking the time to fact-check their fact-checking. And in my field in particular, students tend to swallow almost anything that has good SEO, right? So they may pull a quotation from, I'm sorry if this is an offensive statement, the wackiest, far out, Jesus was an alien website without stopping to critically think about that if they're doing it in the moment. Right? Now, if they do it outside of class, maybe that doesn't come through as much. Sometimes it does. But in the moment, there's not time to critically on those sources. And even if they came out of high school with some quick mnemonic or some heuristic, like the CRAP test or the RADCAB test, if you know anything about those can be fooled very easily by somebody who knows those tests. Don't believe me? Google Pacific tree octopus, all right? And just read a bunch of Googles about Pacific tree octopus. So those kinds of considerations, but especially those two issues that we just talked about. Also, distraction is an issue, right? We talked about the cone of distraction earlier. Kyle introduced distraction. There's research on the cone of distraction. The cone of distraction is actually worse for the people in the cone than from the people generating the cone. 2013 study showed that under controlled conditions, students who attempted to multitask in class scored 11% lower on an assessment than students who did not attempt to multitask. Students who were distracted by other students multitasking scored 17% lower on the assessment. So the effect may actually be, side stream distraction may actually be a stronger negative than self-distraction. So I thought, there's so many great tools that we have, so many great ways we can use technology. How about if I try what I'm going to call the airplane strategy. The airplane strategy, which is you have your devices off for takeoff and landing. When I tell you that we've reached 30,000 feet, get out your devices, and we're going to actually use them for specific activities. And most of my activities would have been generating material in courses at this time. And the thing is, I here observed more on-task behaviors than previously, because I was actually giving them a task to do with the thing, right? However, as I walked around through the different groups, I would often observe multiple windows were always open, right? There was always an IM window open. There was frequently a video, a YouTube open that was not related to what we were doing. And the freeloader problem still continued to exist. Plus, this introduced a new problem. Students would often, even though they didn't need to, because the resources were there, they should have been, prepared for what we were doing. With the and this model, by the way, is sort of a flipped idea. I would expect them to have brought in material to be prepared for these discussions and these activities. Quite often, they were waiting and trying to do the research on the spot, which led not only to uncritical analysis of what they were, these sources that they were finding, quickly, but also increased opportunities and increased evidence, increased incidence of what I'm going to call micro-plagiarism. Right? In other words, copy-paste, no attribution, because it's on the web, right? So yeah, it's Wikipedia, so it's free, and I don't have to source it. All right, so this gets us up to about September 28th, 2015. I know the exact date because I looked it up on Amazon. When I ordered a book, purchased a book called Teaching Naked by Jose Antonio Bowen. Any relation? No? Has anybody read this book? Do you know this book? Teaching Naked. We have one person who's read Teaching Naked and yet is fully clothed. That's a good thing. All right, because we're running short on time here, but to put this in a nutshell, Jose Antonio Bowen, he's president of Goucher College, was formerly dean of the Meadow School for the Arts at Southern Methodist University, right next door to Perkins Theological Seminary, which is where I got most of my PhD education in Southern Methodist University. His argument in the book, to shrink this down to real basics, is this. Information delivery can be done a lot better than by somebody lecturing, and can be done a lot more cheaply than by somebody lecturing. And that students have choices now that they didn't have before. And that instead of listening to my mediocre lecture, they can listen to a world-class expert's lecture. Now, on the one hand, that's kind of exciting in a way, because I could potentially draw from, instead of having to have like a textbook that's all written by one person, we can maybe assemble a series of lectures by people who are experts on those particular niches within our disciplines. But Bowen's point here is that if what learning is, if what we're trying to deliver is information, students can get that a lot more cheaply than by paying Pepperdine tuition. All right? What they can't get from a MOOC or an edX or a Harvard or an MIT OpenCourseWare, what they can't get from that is the personal contact with the professor. And what they can't get is real-time interaction with the professor when they're working on a problem. Right? They can get that from our classes. So what he advocates in this book, again, this is a fairly long book, so I'm way oversimplifying, but basically what he's advocating is essentially, you could call it a flipped classroom, you could call it by other names. He doesn't exactly use that terminology precisely because he's trying to build up the view that what he's talking about is high-touch, active learning in the classroom, with information delivery outside of the classroom. And he sees the balance of technology, that where technology is most useful to us in that process is outside the classroom. So he's advocating vastly increasing the bandwidth that we use outside of class time to communicate with our students. Being on Twitter, maybe being on Facebook? I don't know. If you have a course page, on Facebook, in our case, using our LMS, using courses to communicate with our students, and vastly reducing the use of technology inside the classroom, because the things that the technology itself is best for are things students can do on their own time without our supervision, right? So that doing the things that where our presence is most helpful is the way you spend the time when you're together. He advocates this for meetings too, by the way, which many of us, I think, would sort of embrace. So that brings us to September 2017, when I finally took the plunge and said, okay, students, we're going to be a technology-free zone in class, mostly. There's a few fudgies around the edge there. But we're mostly going to be a technology-free zone. I'm going to stop lecturing. You're going to this is when I actually did flip the classroom, not when I started talking about flipping the classroom, when I started thinking about a flipped classroom. Because what happened to me was when I quote-unquote flipped the classroom, you know what happened? I filled up all the extra time with additional lectures. That's bad. That's not what that means. All right, so students, you're going to come to class with your 3x5 index cards that tells me what you think the most important or confusing thing was out of the reading. Right? You're going to get in groups of 5, and you're going to pick which of those you want which of those questions you want me to prioritize, things like that. And that's not only one example. So I'm about 2 months into this mostly technology-less class, but still lots of use of technology outside of class, and higher expectations than ever before. I'm asking my students to use the footnote function in their word processor. None of them came to me knowing how to do that. They don't even seem to know how to make the typeface the same in the head and in the body and the footer, things like that. Requiring PDFs. I will not, if you give me a Pages file, it doesn't exist. Give me a docx, doesn't exist. Only a PDF exists to me when I'm grading your assignments, things like that. So and Yona can testify to the extent to which I use the lessons tool in my Hebrew class. My students are interacting with that daily. And they probably have 3 quizzes for each class that's delivered through courses, and they're uploading their assignments, and they're using the new checklist feature, which apparently works now. And it's really fantastic. I am, at this point, really enjoying the results. But let me share one little bitty footnote. I'll stop. But it's not just the students who suffer from the kinds of distraction by technology in the classroom, right? It's us as well. Okay, and so I leave my iPad in my office when I go to class. I've started even leaving my phone, unless I know I'm going to use it for a timer, or I want to play music while the students are doing something. I leave it in my office, or at least I leave it on the podium when I'm walking around, so that I'm not constantly wondering, hey, has anybody answered that post? Is it time for me to reset my shuttles on Star Trek timelines? I feel it vibrating. Is that my wife? I'd better check and make sure. And PowerPoint. Now, I haven't used PowerPoint per se in a long time. Keynote, slides. You'll notice I'm not using any right now because I found that I put myself, and Landon can testify, to how much effort I've put into PowerPoint slides, into Keynote slides, into the design, the visual design and elegance of those slides. But I don't know what your experience is. I said this is just autobiographical. My experience is that when I have a slide deck, I am a slave to the slide deck. And if I don't get through all my slides, I feel anxiety. I feel stress, and I feel guilt. All right? And to me, I have found about myself that coming to class with a slideshow prepared turns it into just-in-case teaching instead of just-in-time teaching, if I can use those buzzwords. It is hard for me to respond to students without feeling like I got to get on to the next slide if I have a slide. If I don't have a slide, I don't feel that anxiety, right? Because I don't feel like I'm betraying my agenda. So that is, in a nutshell, that's why, Kristen, I had this unorthodox title for this talk and why I came to a TechLearn conference to share why I unplugged my classroom. Did you want to do any kind of Q&A, or do you want to go straight to Landon? One question right here.
Have you done any virtual teaching? And if so, do you use a flipped classroom model for that? And what is your experience with that?
All right, so the closest I've ever come to an online course was in a hybrid model faculty professional development course that Landon and I did together. That was only like a 6-week or 6-meeting experience. So I think 3 or 4 of those meetings were online. And so I can't really speak to that experience. I don't have that experience. Yeah, it's all been face-to-face for me. Obviously, it's hard to unplug an online classroom, right? Yeah. My son graduated from an online charter high school. And my younger son, who's 14, has been in an online charter school. All of his schooling has been in an online school. So I'm experienced with it from the parents' point of view, but not from the teacher's point of view. One more.
What has been your students' response to you making this change?
You know, the students this semester, when the expectation is just, we just don't do this, has been fine. I have not heard much in the way of grumbling. I have made an exception in one case for a student whose role in the class required it. Okay, so that would take another long, really thing, but recently, we've been going through an experience where we had 3 students whose job was to chronicle what happened in class. That was their role in the class. And so one of those students used a computer to do so, the other 2 did not. I had one student ask, is it okay if I use my phone to play some music through the speakers, to play some sound effects through the speakers when we do this particular activity? And I said, sure. But when I was trying to do it sort of half and half, the airplane mode, I got a lot of pushback and a lot of resistance. Not confrontational, just once they were out, students were really slow to put things away. Or they would come in before class and immediately pop out their computers and start doing stuff until I said, okay, y'all, it's time to put them away. This class, this semester, they don't do that. They maybe have their phones out, but they don't have their laptops out. Yeah. One more question from Mark, and then Landon.
What percentage of your classes have group discussion activities, and what percentage are you talking?
So it depends on the class session, and it depends on the activity, the specific activity for the day. So up until about 3 weeks ago, I would say that the balance was about the first 45 minutes of students talking to each other and about the last 30 minutes interacting with me. For the last 3 weeks, it's been 100% student, 0% me. And there's been one day that was close to 100% me responding to questions students had submitted, and that's going to be the case again tomorrow. So up and down. But a lot more of the students talking to each other and me responding to their questions and their propositions than it ever was before.